Welcome to Truth Behind Travel Podcast, a platform for tourism, travel, and hospitality professionals and enthusiasts to share, learn, and unlearn what we need to create better tourism, protect the environment, and become better humans. I'm your host, Dolores Semeraro, and every week I bring on the podcast the voices of those out there making a difference to learn the hard truth behind the world of travel and tourism, what works and what we can collectively do better. Welcome back to Truth Behind Travel Podcast. On the last episode with Aaron Flessler, we covered how experienced operators are navigating this AI-led dynamics we are living through in the tourism and travel industry. So today, we're taking a step further into more dynamics concerning the global operators, less related to tools and data, and more related to what travelers seek when they're on the move and when they come back. How does the industry help them in the process and ultimately transform? Whether you are an experienced operator or a traveler questioning the hows and the whys of what traveling can truly mean for all people and for our planet, today's episode with the CEO and co-founder of the Transformational Travel Council will touch on the travel as a force for transformation. What does the transformational process look like? And how does that lead into a greater adoption of the transformation economy? Without further ado, let's welcome the CEO and co-founder of the Transformational Travel Council, Jake Haupert. Welcome back to the show. Thank you, Jake, for joining me today on Truth Behind Travel Podcast.
Thanks, Dolores. Really excited to be here with you.
Finally, we meet virtually after a short meeting in person a few years back in Portugal.
Yeah.
And before we start, I always love my guests to give a bit of an introduction of yourself, who you are, your milestone, if you want, what you like to share about the person that you have become and what made you what you are today.
I'm based in Seattle, Washington, in the Pacific Northwest of the States. And I've got a couple kids, teens, one of them about to go off to university. I try to spend as much time as I can outside, connected to nature, really appreciating this beautiful place we call planet Earth. And, a lot of my work is around helping others to connect with nature as well. And that's through the lens of connecting to self first, better understanding who we are and what's important to us and our values and, really digging into our identity and our agency. And so, a lot of the work that we're doing and travel at the Transformational Travel Council is really deepening experiences, moving travel from experiences into transformations, through a defined process. I started down this path, more than a decade ago, after working in a previous company, Evergreen Escapes, for more than a decade, and really starting to appreciate the power of travel in our lives, and recognizing that the current design of travel and tourism, delivery of travel and tourism, was missing, I think the most important aspects, and the reasons why we travel and what we're seeking in travel, as it became very commoditized and very disconnected from, learning and stretching and growing and becoming better versions of our world, becoming more global citizens. And so, I went down that path of, my own, reevaluation of my own life purpose at that time, and met some other wonderful colleagues on a similar path. And we decided to see if we could disrupt travel and really dig into what it means and how we can essentially do travel better and move the industry, down that path. And so, we've dug deep over the years into, psychology and spiritual transcendence and neuroscience, really trying to better understand the human condition and human connection, and then overlay that into travel and experiences in general, transformative experiences. So now we have a global membership, and we provide transformative education, to businesses across the sector, whether it's destinations or hospitality, travel advisors, guides, you name it. It's really elevating their experience strategy.
Wow. I think it's when you mentioned the process, and I kind of want to spend a little time there, because between transformation and reality of things and the reality of the ecosystem that you quite often find this operator working in, there's a huge space. So I just want to ask you, how does that space look like?
Yeah. I mean, our process is all designed to create lasting change, right? On traveler, but also on the hosts and destinations and communities that people visit. So it's a recalibration of how we design and orchestrate travel experiences. And so, a lot of the travel today is focused on travel as a product, right? You go on to your favorite online travel agency and you book your car, your hotel, your cruise. Maybe you bundle it up and create a package. But we're shifting it back into like, well, no, travel is this process that's an unfolding that starts well before the journey and continues well after. And so travel companies that are leaning into transformation in a meaningful way really understand that and are learning to guide and facilitate that process. And recognizing that drives real value and impact, for not just the traveler or the guest at your hotel, but for the entire system that you're working within.
And the value that it drives for them, of course, as first of all, as you said, people that are leaning into the transformational side of travel, it brings them sort of on a path of, okay, I believe in this. I believe in what it represents and in what it stands for not just for my business, but also for everyone involved in the business. It could be the operators, the suppliers, the communities on the ground. And so the transformation process kind of doesn't just happen in the business, but it also happens all around. By affecting so many people, it affects the economy at large. So much so that even on the Transformational Travel Council website, you often refer to it as the transformation economy. And that economy today is becoming the bread and butter of a process that many in the tourism industry have put in motion. But some and quite many, I have to say, they sit on the buzzwords rather than doing the work, right?
Yeah.
So if you were to, from your point of view, tell me a little bit, what does transformation economy really need to entail? What does it mean? Who are the players? Who is working in it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a fundamental shift in how we move through the strategy and design and development, of not only experiences, but also our companies, and our hotels and our destinations, our communities, our tour operators, whatever it may be. And it kind of goes back to that process of, at the front end, there's a diagnosis. You really have to understand, in the transformation economy, what is the traveler's motivation? What is their why? What's calling them to a given adventure, and that really starts to unlock the potential of the entire experience. So then you get into like coaching and mentorship. How do you guide them through that process? How can you help them become more present, during their experience? How can you help them slow down? How can you take them through a process of reflection and meaning making, not just across the entire journey, but each day? Each day is an experience, but it's all working towards some sort of outcome. So when we talk about the transformation economy, ultimately it's not, necessarily about, what can we do? It's about how can we help you become, whatever that may be for you. Right. That can be, I want to become, I want to switch careers. I want to, start or end a relationship and, these big T transformations, or it can just be, I want to be more empathetic, or I want to be more goal oriented. I want to be more compassionate. I want to have more clarity and confidence in my life. Right. But we use the travel experience, or in the transformation economy, really any organization that you're working with, to work you towards some sort of desired outcome. And so, those that are in the transformation economy, and we're still very emergent within it, are really learning how to structure this in a way that drives towards outcomes, and identifying and realizing the value creation that sits there when you help someone achieve goals. When you, as Joe Pine, who's one of our advisors and the author of this new book called The Transformation Economy, fantastic, a must read, built on his previous success, The Experience Economy. But when you can help someone become better versions of themselves or achieve a goal or aspiration, then you're providing value that currently the industry, is not really touching. But it's not a flip the switch type of thing. You don't enter the transformation economy just because you want to, or because it's buzzy, or because it's trendy. You typically have to go through your own sort of transformative journey. You have to be a little bit more introspective around your own values and purpose, and appreciate what transformation is if you have any success with designing for, leading, facilitating, or guiding transformations in a meaningful way.
Do you see operators being more responsive to the call of transformation, the call for transformation in Europe, or on this side of the pond, or here around the US? Because I'm witnessing different things around here. Like I'm in the southern states at this time.
That's a great question. One that we're still trying to navigate, because when I started down this path, I grew up in a environment, family, community where transformation was just part of our way of being, right? And so that's what really led me into recognizing that there was a gap in travel and tourism as it is today, to kind of go back to the roots of why we travel. But that term transformation, it can be a challenging term. It can be heavy, and it can be intimidating for some folks. And it's also very difficult to define because it's uniquely our own. We define how we transform. So that word in itself is difficult within your traditional mainstream travel and tourism space. And it's in traditional tourism travel space, it's focused on transactions. It's focused on experiences that are driving toward volume. More is better, and volume and profitability, rather than meaning and purpose, and guiding people from where they were to where they want to go. Right. So, transformation, depending upon where you're at, certainly different cultures, different communities have a different comfort level with the term transformational travel. But I think that a lot of it, before I say that, I'll say that, certainly in Europe, there seems to be a little bit more openness. Latin America definitely have a sort of a natural appreciation for this because it seems to be more integrated into their culture. I can see, some of our strongest membership bases are in India, where this, sort of Buddhism and Hinduism is integrated into, and they're thinking about growth and stretching and becoming, so there are these pockets where this is certainly a little bit more approachable. And then there's those that are not, and certainly in the US is probably where we face the most obstacle or challenge to this, and then I'm not really sure exactly why that is. I could speculate that a lot of it just has to do with, when we talk about transformation, it typically requires some sort of disorientation, disruption, overcoming some sort of challenge. There's, often suffering. And, so unless you've had that journey in your capacity, or this is part of your family or culture, it's really difficult to understand and connect with the value of any sort of transformative experience. And so identifying those folks, in those markets or those destinations or that portfolio of hotels or that group of travel agencies, it's usually the individuals. It's usually the people, the leaders that have sort of this innate appreciation for what it is, that are more open to it than others per se.
I thought about the process and how would that transformation process feel like for an operator. I I mean, I think of a system that calls for a behavior,
Mm-hmm.
in the people that are working in your company, in your team, and the behavior that you basically encourage visitors to have at the
Mm-hmm.
destination level. The system you build
Mm-hmm.
calls for the behavior that you know that happens. It's not the other way around. It's like, oh, this is bad tourism, or these tourists don't really care about anything transformational. They just want to get the best price, get the rate, get
Mm-hmm.
the room with the view, and the access to the swimming pool, and a parking just next to the hotel. So this very, very product
Mm-hmm.
oriented sort of factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, the hospitality industry is a bit of a slave of that, in terms of that process, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like a dog that bites its tail. What do we do first? What do we do? What they're asking us to
Yeah.
do? What our customers are asking us to do? So we start a process of transformation that perhaps will call for other
Mm-hmm.
customers, maybe not, who knows. And as you said,
Mm-hmm.
it calls for certain uncertainty to
Mm-hmm.
go through it. Not every leader can do that. In the Transformational Travel Council, the early adopters that you work with, if you
Mm-hmm.
were to, I know people listening to this podcast will be like, oh, okay, maybe I can be on a transformation journey myself. I just don't know if do I qualify. So the
Mm-hmm.
early adopters that you work with, what triggered them? What did you recognize in them? Like, was it bravery? Was it vision? What was it?
Really good question. I will tell you that I've had many conversations, as you might imagine, with folks that are drawn into this. And more often than not, there's typically some sort of shift in their own awareness or identity, or behaviors at work. They're starting to question, why do I do what I do? How can I do it better? Sort of taking an existential approach to lives and their work. They find us or reach out to us, I often hear, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one that was doing this or thinking this. I felt very lonely. I mean, you speak our language, right? So we've created this container, if you will, of folks who are really reevaluating what travel and tourism means to them in their own lives, and also, what is that expression? How is that expressed in their work, whether that's at a hotel or a destination, whatever that may be. And so, they're sort of naturally in their own transformative process because they're asking why, right? Because they're getting into their own motivations, which, as I said earlier, is that first stage, that diagnosis. So a lot of those that are reaching out to us are sort of self-assessing, self-evaluating, and then seeking out practical ways that they can shift their business or their experience strategy around more purpose, more meaning, more connection, more belonging, more reciprocity.
You said it yourself. You speak to many operators sometimes, and they
Yeah.
come to you and they said, "This is exactly what I mean." And when
Hmm.
instead you have this conversation, and unfortunately that person just doesn't have it, just is not
Yeah.
on the right path, and you got to have the heart to say, sorry, you're really not getting it right. This is like, how do you go about
Yeah.
that?
Oh gosh, I wish I had the solution there. I mean, I would say that we probably speak with more people that don't see the value in it, aren't connecting with it, and I think for many years, actually, to our own detriment, we spent a lot of time and energy trying to convince people. And that's not a good and healthy place to be. No one wants to be, told what's right or wrong or lectured or anything, or made to feel that they don't understand something or don't see anything. And so, this question that you ask, is a very sensitive one. It's a very tricky one, and I think that transformation economy, and that work in Jill Pine, and really framing it around the opportunity that exists within business and value creation, and how it creates more loyalty, how you can charge a premium for this, how you can increases referrals. Those things start to crack, at the foundation of your typical business your business proposition, right? Because now you're able to translate this into, this is something I should listen to, or this is something I should acknowledge, or let me explore more, let me sign up for this class or course. But without that business framing, for a lot of people, they're all stretched thin. They're trying to figure out, it's hard to be a small business owner. It's hard to be CEO of a large enterprise. So trying to squeeze in new innovation and new concepts and new ideas and perceptions is a challenge for any of us, and we specialize in change. We know that the human condition, that it is difficult to change. On one hand, we're going through change constantly. Change is constant in our lives. But when we try to be intentional about change, whether it's a New Year's resolution or some sort of goal or aspiration, it's hard for us, right? Much of the mainstream market is very slow to adopt, some of this new innovation, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of the journey. It's part of what change is. The experience economy was first on the scene, 25 years ago, and there are still companies trying to figure that out, right? So this is a really long evolution, and one that I'm excited to continue to participate in for decades to come.
You almost act as a translator of the process. It's because as a team, I can imagine your team going through these conversations and being sometimes met with resistance or belief or dubbed people, from middle management to leadership level. And in every conversation, you gather more intel, you gather more information about, okay, what is it that is stopping people from joining in? What is stopping? What are the main concerns? So, and I think one of the main concerns in many cases is the money. When we talk about running a business, yes, we do run a business out of passion, out of vision, out of a call for what is meaningful to us. And ultimately, if we hire people to do the business or in our company, it's also about making money to give the possibility for the employees to have a livelihood, to have a salary, go back and feed their family, and so on and so forth. So money is important, and it's not a topic that it's not very romantic in the greater scheme of transformation, but it is part of the conversation. And so when you talk to these leaders, or even just the managers, or at any level of the organization, really, the tension between the potential of transformations and the potential of profit is there. And so when you reflect on this conversation, where do you see that tension being?
Many businesses in hospitality and tourism, especially given how much fluctuation there is around travel and tourism, it forces businesses to be super adaptive and resilient and thoughtful. So when you introduce change, and you're typically building organizations based on scalable growth, right, or what can be repeated. I think we lose a lot of confidence in something that may take a little bit more care or slow us down or not be as scalable, or where is that? Where are those deltas? Where are those gaps made up, right? And so, I think when we talk about transformation, it's an increase in or moving from personalized to becoming more personal. Facilitating, in more of an intentional and skilled way. We typically talk about slowing down, right? All of these are counter to sort of our capitalistic state of minds, right? But then you dig a little bit deeper and you start to recognize that, there is great opportunity to charge a premium for these type of experiences, right? So you're making it up there. There is a stronger sense of pride and purpose and productivity and performance within organizations that get in the transformation economy. So what does that mean? Well, you have less turnover, you have happier, more joyful teams, and staffs at hotels, and all of that starts to create, coherence in that creates a more positive and thriving and resilient environment. But we have these mental constructs and obstacles that we have to overcome first. Another one is measure. How do you measure meaning? How do you measure transformation? right? So these are things that we're still uncovering, and there's tried and true ways of measuring, where you are now and where you are after an experience. But how does that take that next step in terms of translate into business metrics and KPIs, and making sure that if they do invest in this, that it's going to bear fruit, that you're going to be able to sustain and thrive after a transition into the transformation economy. There's just a lot of mental disruption, that has to happen in terms of the old paradigm and the new paradigm. And if you're just going to go status quo every day, if you're not going to be bringing a beginner's mind and be open to new innovation and maybe take a little bit of risk, then you're potentially going to miss out on the opportunity. You're going to 10 years from now say, "Oh, I should have been a first mover. I should have been an early adopter." Right? Because it is moving in this direction. It's just at what point are you going to decide to actively engage it and do something different?
And so if a business owner decides to engage, what's the timeline?
Mm-hmm.
What's the time frame you're looking at? I'm not saying transformation per se is the way I see it. Maybe I'm wrong. It's a constant change. You don't transform to become something else, and that's it. Then you've become it, and then you're done. You are transforming, and that becomes your way of going through things. The way you join into. You don't just change your identity because you have transformed into something new. You keep on transforming, and eventually you build upon some elements that instead are staying. Some are, instead of, you're leaving them behind, you're transforming in something else, and keep the good and continuing, along the way. That's how I see it. An operator listening to the podcast today, looking at a transformational journey, what does that mean in terms of how long does it take? At least to feel that you are in a good point, at a good point, and how much we're talking about. Like, is it expensive to sort of start a transformational journey?
That's one of the challenges that this shift brings, because everyone is on their own journey, and one of the key aspects of any transformative process is meeting them where they're at. Really hard to meet an entire market or an entire audience where they're at. So we have to be able to give them different pathways, spark that interest, and then try to provide something that guides them through a process that works for them. For those that are interested, I would recommend purchasing The Transformation Economy, Joe Pine's new book. I think that's very accessible in terms of, what would be the word, consuming and embodying some of the changes and shifts that are required mentally and internally. And it's framed in a way, in language that's comfortable for most of us. There is a delta, and a lot of this language is maybe a little bit deeper than we're comfortable with, right? We're, especially in Western culture, and United States specifically, we like to keep things kind of at the surface. We also have our signature accreditation program, which is a 6-week intensive, and our next one's in January. That is a commitment of about 5 to 10 hours a week to go through that process. It is designed to be a transformative process in itself. It's about personal and professional development. And we get fantastic reviews. We've got hundreds of alumni around the world on that. We've just developed a new program at the University of South Carolina that's asynchronous, meaning for the most part, you can take these courses, as you wish, right? And we've got different programs and bundling around it, and transformational travel, regenerative practice, and then how to sell and market it. And so this is our most accessible programming for someone that's interested in moving into this, but also going back to experience it yourself, right? So we offer pilgrimage. We've got a pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago, 10 days in May. We've got a couple on the Kimono Kodo in Japan, because that's sort of an ancient, yet contemporary take on transformational travel in practice, right? You are setting intention, You're slowing down. You're integrating a little bit more of sense of purpose and presence, right? You're becoming more aware of where you've been and where you want to go and how you might be able to get there. And so you end up walking, right? And there is, you want to move to some sort of clarity. Well, go on a long walk, right? Like that will really serve you well. So that's another way to get engaged. Is start, start introducing it into your own life, into your own travel practice. See how it fits. Try it on. My guess is that if you do that, you're probably going to realize, hey, this is incredible. This has value. I want to weave this into my experience strategy.
You almost have to take some of the destination at the destination level. Some of the destination managers on a press trip, or on an experience trip, to say, look, this is what we're doing in this part of the world. How do you feel? And how would you feel? How would you like your visitors to feel when they come to your destination? So if we sort of like, let's zoom out from, private sector operators, experience operators, let's call them like that. Let's talk about the institutions, the public sector, the destination at, the management level of bigger destinations, also smaller, also niche destinations. Sometimes, actually many times, unfortunately, in the world we are living now, the narrative of the destination is not really in the hands of the destination per se. The narrative of a place is led by what people are saying, what people are posting, the picture that they are sharing, the reviews that they are posting out with their peers, and that's I personally believe it's a big issue, because sometimes you read about a place and a sort of an impression is formed, and you haven't even been there, and you don't have a hands on it. You're not the steward of your own destination, so to speak. When you work with the destinations and you look at the way they can own it, what's the first step? What is it that the simplest thing that a destination can do to start owning their narrative, to become the steward, the makers of their destination destiny?
Good and challenging question. I would say that what a lot of destinations and destination leaders are recognizing, that they have to move from selling places into creating space and container for learning and growth and meaning and potentially transformation. But, getting into, kind of going back into what I was saying, unless you have been through a transformative journey, it's really challenging to know exactly where to go or what to do, right? So, what can a destination, what can communities do? I think it's really important for them to, probably put their own community and place first, right? Like instead of looking at it from like, what can we do for the visitor or the traveler, but how can we be better stewards of our place and our people and our culture and our ecosystem? And I think that actually creates the fertile conditions for more meaningful and transformative experiences for visitors. There's tons of data and trends out there that say travelers are wanting, more meaning. They want more purpose. They want more reciprocity. They want more authenticity. They want to have real engagement. They want to have real encounters. And right now there's a big tension that exists between visitors and visited. So a lot of the work that we do with DMOs, destination marketing organizations or management organizations, is shift them into, what is the potential of the destination when we reframe around, your people in place and what is your purpose, and let those experiences, encounters, and exchanges that come downstream, really start to contribute toward what a thriving community looks like, or a thriving tourism strategy and tourism model within communities. I think that's the future of travel and tourism, not just is the traveler seeking transformation, but what can our places and our communities do differently to make sure that encounter is beautiful and impactful and thoughtful as it can be.
And may lead to the right behavior as a result.
Yeah.
Because actually, funny enough, you mentioned South Carolina just earlier.
Mm-hmm.
As I was visiting Charleston last week, I witnessed a so-called tourism behavior, let's frame it like that, of beautiful girls, and there was a family or a group of people all happily taking photos in front of it's called the Rainbow Row in Charleston. It's where all these beautiful, colorful houses are. But not only, there's colorful houses all over the city, and especially in the historic district. What really got me thinking is that they were happily selfing their afternoon away out of a building that was actually a slave house, or was a building that was used to trade and sell and purchase slaves at the time. What really got me thinking there was like, okay, so here we have a destination that has an opportunity to encourage a behavior that calls for perhaps an appreciation or a sense of respect for what this, for example, this building would mean, instead of just being content with having to have the tourists taking the photos because the house is colorful, because the architecture is being renovated and it looks pretty. So the look rather than the purpose, the aesthetics ahead of the meaningful experiences. And I think there's a lot of missed opportunities. Some destinations have that opportunity and / responsibility to encourage a behavior that is suited and suitable for what they want to be remembered for. It's exactly the question you asked earlier. What do you want the visitors to feel like when they are in front of that specific landmarks, or that specific monument, or a house, or an historic place that has importance, like historical importance? So that's the system that is built around the way visitors are experiencing the destination. And sometimes that system calls for aesthetics rather than that appreciation that comes from the design of the experience. In the Transformational Travel Council, you work a lot on how you design these experiences at the destination level, with operators, with destination management organizations. What do you think is, because I witnessed it in myself, and I thought, okay, it's just a building, and they put a plaque on the building that says, this was a slave house. Is that enough? So I asked myself, was that enough?
I think that destinations and more forward-looking community destination leaders that are leaning into this and understand that, that there is meaning in depth, right? I think are the ones that are arguably the best position to provide better experiences. And I think that so much of our industry has been so focused on the surface-based experiences that they've sort of lost touch of what is real, authentic about a place, and why is it important and how does it fit, right? So these are all conversations that we have, when we work with DMOs to better help them understand who they are, who do they want to be, what is their purpose? How do we create the conditions for thrivability within our community? Who do we want to have here? What do we want them to do when they arrive, right? What are the behaviors we want them to embody? And so this leans into some of that when we talk about systems change, creating, moving the industry into, a more cooperative approach. So now you have the travel advisor that might be working with, this traveler that likes to travel in abundance, everything easy, and they don't want to overcome any challenges or obstacles or be in a position that might challenge their way of seeing the world, right? So, that's where on the front end, with the advisors, or even if you're traveling on your own without a travel advisor, better understanding, who you are and taking responsibility for traveling better, you live and others live better. by having some of these conversations. And our industry has been so focused on order taking. Whatever you want, we can do, right? And that is a broken model, right? Because that leads to entitlement, it leads to expectation, it inflates egos, it creates crazy power dynamics, and the whole thing starts to crumble and break down, right? So if there's no one guiding the traveler into how to travel better, more ethically, or more mindfully, more consciously, they're going to keep repeating the same behaviors. So there's the opportunity for the travel company or the traveler on the front end, but then there is a lot of accountability on the destination end. So they're actually, drawing in the type of travelers that they want, and they're, providing experiences that are really resonant and of essence of that people in place that drive toward, very specific outcomes that help them become a thriving community centered around people in place first.
Maybe because I'm currently driving through probably the country in the world where everything needs to be bigger and louder and greater, and the bigger the better. In everything, and not just in the marketing side of things or the sales and commercial side of things, but also in the daily things. Even when you eat at a restaurant, the portions are huge. And coming from an old little European, and you come here and order a salad, and the salad is like this massive plate. Everything feels bigger. So if everything feels bigger in general, like America is an example. Sort of like we say this not as a criticism, but we say this with, like with a smile on our face, saying, okay, these are things that if you come from abroad, you notice. So if everything needs to be bigger, better, grander in the scale of business. So, and you mentioned to go deep, to go into an understanding, to go inwards rather than forwards. Do you think that calls for a jargon that, it's almost like a niche? Is transformational travel niche or can scale up?
I think it's both. I think, I think it is absolutely a niche, in terms of, it is emerging as its own sector, its own space, right? There are travelers that this resonates with deeply, and they've always traveled this way. Right. And now we're creating container and process and techniques and tactics to support that. Right. So, and then there are providers and experienced designers and hotels and lodges and that have been doing this sort of thing for a very long time, and so this is maybe providing, a little bit more consistency, within that sector and allowing it to flourish. So that's happening and has been. And then there is just a basic philosophical approach. How can I look at any travel experience near and far, through the lens of a process of diagnosis, presence, activation, and integration, right? That, why am I going all the way into, this is the experience I had. I reflected on it. I made meaning for me. These are the changes I want to make in my life. And then making those changes. So that can be applied to luxury travel, that can be applied to adventure travel, that fits into wellness, because it's just an inner awareness. When we talk about transformation, it's that shift in identity, behaviors, agency, et cetera. So that can be applied to any travel. The transformation economy and what we're talking about through that, through the lens of creating value, and differentiating yourself in the space, I think that's absolutely scalable. No matter whether you're, a cruise ship that's got 5,000 passengers on board, or you're a destination that, takes 5,000 people a year, whatever it may be. These are sort of universal principles and practices that can be adopted and implemented at the scale that works for you. And so, I think as organizations start to recognize that they can put purpose before profit and contribute toward value creation and positive change, that inevitably the industry will move out of transformational travel and it'll just become travel. Sort of this, just like it was in the very beginning. Right? When we look at rites of passage and quests, right? When we look at pilgrimage, that wasn't transformational travel. That was just travel. So I think we'll see this come back full circle. Like, we should have always looked at travel as this opportunity to intentionally stretch, learn, and grow into new ways of being and engaging the world.
Is that why you also approach students' bodies, universities or in learning institution, to kind of starts from the very, very origin of it, kind of breed them up?
I'm thrilled to be working with youth and universities, especially as, I've got two teens that are in the workforce, and, our tourism industry has become stale. It's gotten a little bit of a bad reputation, and there needs to be an injection of, new possibility and new energy, and when you talk about helping people have really meaningful experiences in their lives that contribute to, a better community, better family, better community, better society, that's energizing for folks, so it's good for universities, for our youth to be looking at this industry through a different lens, not what we've been for the last 20 or 30 years, but what we're becoming over the next 20 to 30 years. And come join us, because it's going to be, arguably one of the best industries in the world to be a part of again. And I think we've lost touch with that.
I was going to ask you for the last few words of wisdom to conclude the podcast today, but I think you just delivered them. I just love the way you put it. I love the conversation today. We touched on the transformational journey. We made our way through trying to define the transformation economy. And just as a side note, if anyone wants to buy the book of Joe Pine on the transformation economy, you can buy it on Amazon for $30, which is not cheap for a book online, I must say. So please do so. Mm-hmm. Invest. It's money well spent. For those listening to this conversation today, I would like you to give them a takeaway.
Yeah, you just touched on it in terms of Joe Pine's book. That's money well spent. It makes me think of, something that a big part of that book and the transformation economy, and what Joe and I have spent a lot of time talking about, is the shift from time well spent to time well invested. And so that shift really captures what transformation in the transformation economy is all about, because it talks about, better understanding, where you are and where you want to go, that diagnosis, it starts to point toward what are your aspirations, and starts to shift whatever you're engaging into activation, into growth mindset, so you can work towards a desired outcome. So if you're a traveler, or whether you're industry, and, very specific into the context of travel and tourism, because that's what we're discussing, whether you're designing travel or engaging travel, look at it as this opportunity to really become whatever it is that is for you. And if you're in the business, you're becoming a transformation, a ambassador, activator of transformations, and creating better people, better communities, and a better planet.
Thank you, Jake. And for everybody listening to the podcast, all the contact details to get in touch with Jake and his team at the Transformational Travel Council are in the show notes perpetually. So at any time, people are listening to this podcast can go to the show notes and find their contact details to meet the team, have a conversation. Really, it just starts from there, and see where that takes them, So thank you, Jake, for being on the podcast. And I look forward to meeting you again soon, sometime in person.
Me too. I really appreciate the conversation, Dolores, and the space that you've created for such rich dialogue. I hope that your audience found value in it today.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today with me and Jake. We covered so much on this episode that I feel a further summary is necessary, and you will find it in the show notes. And if you have questions, it's great to have questions. Please raise your hand, symbolically to say, and reach out. Let me know, what would you like to ask? Or what would you have asked to Jake? Well, until next time, be well, my friend.